Sunak, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, unveiled a package of £150 billion of post-COVID spending in his autumn budget yesterday. But after vowing to build a stronger economy, there's criticism inflation could leave the poorest families worse off.
What could this forecast strain mean for households as the cost of living goes up? Well, the Chancellor joins us now. Good morning to you. Thanks for joining us this morning. Looking at this budget, there are millions that it doesn't help, aren't there? When we look at the universal credit taper, that will benefit 1.9 million working families. But that cut in the universal credit uplift has hit 6 million. So there are millions who are going to be facing a real hit to the money in their pockets and are facing a cost of living crisis as a consequence, and you were able to do nothing for them.
Well, I think it's important to first take a step back. If you think a year ago and consider what people were expecting this autumn to look like, because of the plan that we put in place a year ago, I was able to deliver a budget yesterday which was a strong budget. We've got many more people in work, fewer people out of work than we feared, and the economy recovering faster than people expected. And as a result of all those actions, we can now invest in public services, drive our future growth, back businesses like the ones I'm surrounded by, but also support working families, as you highlighted. And an important part of that was cutting taxes for millions of the lowest paid and doing things like freezing fuel duty, which will help with the cost of living.
But what about those not working, who I was just saying, those one who are facing now a cut in universal credit? We've had Karen getting in touch. I'm disabled with a disabled son. I would work if I could. We're really struggling with increases in gas and electricity and fuel prices. There's another one from Carol. I'm disabled and on universal credit. I'm struggling to heat my home and I have to go to food banks. Why did he not help people like myself? Carol says.
Well, again, I think whenever I'm on the show and you have these case studies, it's hard for me to know everyone's particular situation, but what I would say is there are a range of different things in place to help people with energy bills. We announced last month the Household Support Fund, £500 million in targeted support for 3 million of the most vulnerable families across the country, with about £150 each, and that's being delivered through local councils. That could well benefit many of the people that you mentioned. There's also a lot of existing support in place to help people with energy bills. There's something called the Warm Homes Discount, for example, which provides, again, around £140 discount or rebate on energy bills for vulnerable households, for pensioners, which weren't in your list but also are important. There is something called the winter fuel payment, up to £300 to help pensioners. And if temperatures really drop, we have the cold weather payment, which is worth about £25 a week to about 4 million vulnerable families. So, look, there's lots of things in place to help with energy bills. We announced some last month to give people reassurance. But as I said yesterday, we did take action. We did things like freezing fuel duty, and we cut taxes on those in the lowest paid work, and the national living wage is rising to £9.50 an hour. Those things will make a meaningful difference.
Mr. Sunak, why wouldn't you, though, when we know in this country the most vulnerable people in this country are those that are going without food? What a disgrace as a country that so many of our fellow citizens this morning will open their fridge and cupboards and find no food and have to go to a food bank. You had an opportunity yesterday in front of the nation to put that right. And you didn't. Instead, you've got this complicated, well, they can get a little bit from housing and they get a little bit from here. You could have absolutely changed that yesterday by saying the most vulnerable, not the people who are working with very low-paid jobs, the people who are unpaid, the people who are disabled, the people who are caring, unpaid carers, and you didn't. You didn't solve that problem directly. Why not?
Well, actually, you said just a little bit of help with housing. Actually, that's probably the biggest cost that people have, all the vulnerable people that you mentioned, and which is why a year ago we increased something called the local housing allowance, which helps our most vulnerable families with their housing bills. That is costing about £1 billion a year, and it means 1.5 million of our most vulnerable families are seeing £600 a year more to help with their housing bills and their rental payments, because housing is a very important part of the cost of living, and we've already taken action on that. And actually, yesterday we outlined an enormous increase in spending on public services. So all the people that you described, I would imagine, benefit from public services in lots of different ways. And because of the actions we took yesterday, there will be strong investment in public services, whether it's our health service, whether it's local councils, whether it's social care, whether it's tackling homelessness and rough sleeping, across the board. And you mentioned food as well. We funded something called the Holiday Activity and Food Programme, £200 million a year, a new programme that we started this year to provide enriching activities and meals for kids
but the point I'm making,
outside of school time. So across the board, there's a lot of support. Now, you might prefer to have cut the pie slightly differently, and that's fair enough. But I don't think anyone can argue that there's a considerable amount of support going in.
People would have preferred that you put money directly into their pockets. Instead, the other thing that you announced was some of the richest people in this country, which will help a lot of people down in the south, was that you are going to reduce the surcharge on profits for banks from 8% to 3%. That is a huge cut. That is the richest people in this country being better off. How can you justify that?
Well, sorry, the volume's very loud and it's coming through quite loud. But let me try and address that, because I think you're wrong on both counts, actually. To assume that people in financial services only work in London and the South is just completely and utterly wrong.
I didn't say only, but
it will.
It will be a majority.
Majority. Let me answer the question. No, but actually... No, well, again, you're wrong, actually, because 2/3 of people who work in the financial services industry actually work outside of London and the South East.
Okay,
they work in places all around the north. They work in the Midlands. Well, if I could finish your question... I could finish your question?
Point about the surcharge.
So let's do that. So first of all, I care about protecting those jobs in that industry across the country, because it's not just people living in London and the South East. That's a stereotype that is wrong. Secondly, the bank tax rate overall is going up. It's going up from 27%, where it was, to 28%. Because we've put up corporation tax in general, we have to adjust the surcharge to take account of that. That's always been the case. And actually, the overall rate of tax on banks is going up. It's not going down. It's going from 27 to 28, and that compares to every other company that's paying 25. And that strikes the right balance, with banks making a fair contribution to the public finances whilst protecting hundreds of thousands of jobs across the country. So I think actually that's absolutely the right thing to do.
Let's talk about national insurance. That's still the biggest problem for many people. They are going to be spending far more money and being taxed far more than they have done before. Can I ask you a question? How much national insurance will you pay?
Well, actually, it's about £8,000, as someone else has pointed out to me. But national insurance is a progressive way to raise money. It has been said as much by many independent people who look at these things. The top 14% of national insurance payers will contribute over half of all the revenues that money raises. So it is a progressive way to raise money. Look, there's no easy way to raise money, so that's just the reality of it. And if other people have a different suggestion, I'm open to hearing what they think would be better. But it's important to remember, what is that money going on? It's going on public services, in particular the number one priority that we all have, which is the NHS. It's helping the NHS recover from coronavirus, increase activity, tackle the elective backlog, and fund in full the Prime Minister's landmark reforms for social care, which is something that you've talked about on your programme before and governments have not been able to deal with in the past. But this government is. The Prime Minister set out those ambitious plans, and the money that's raised from that new health and social care levy will fund that. And I think that is a good thing, and it will mean enormous reassurance to people about their social care bills in the future and an improved social care experience for everyone.
Can I ask you a question? And I think it is relevant. Rishi Sunak, you are a very wealthy man. You yourself are worth over 200 million. Your family, your wife, worth over 400 million. That's a combined wealth of 600 million. Do you really think that you have a connection with those people who are struggling this morning, struggling with getting food from food banks or paying their bills? Do you really, truly understand what they are going through?
Well, I had a choice of many things to do in yesterday's budget. The choice I made was to cut taxes on those on the lowest pay. So a single mother with 2 kids renting a flat in Darlington working full-time on the national living wage is going to be £1,200 better off a couple, one working full-time on the national living wage, the other working half-time with 2 kids renting a flat in London is going to be £1,800. So you asked me about my values and what I want to do. What I want to do is cut taxes for those on the lowest incomes. That's what yesterday's budget did, and I'm delighted that it does that, and it's absolutely an expression of what this government believes.
Right, just before we let you go, we know at the moment we've got the highest tax burden for 70 years. You've spoken about the fact you want to bring taxes down by the end of the Parliament. Can you commit to cutting income tax by the next election?
I would just point you back to the words I said yesterday in my budget speech. I acknowledge the tax burden is high. It's not something that I'm comfortable with. It's a result of us suffering the worst economic shock we've had in 300 years and the response that we put in place to that to help get the country through it. We're now, because of the success of our plan, able to fund strong public services, back businesses, invest in our growth, and crucially, start that journey of reducing taxes for people. And I did that yesterday by cutting taxes on the lowest paid because I believe in making work pay. I'm a big believer in that. I've talked a lot about it. I want to reward people's efforts. I want to make sure that work always pays, and that's why yesterday we cut tax on the lowest paid people.
Rishi Sunak, a lot of people saying very consummate performance yesterday. Looking at you as the future Prime Minister, is that something you're open to? Would you like to lead the country one day?
Yeah, my job is to ensure that we recover strongly from coronavirus and start delivering now on all the things that we announced yesterday. It's all very well standing up and announcing lots of money for things, but I think your viewers should rightly be holding us to account for making sure that their experience of all these public services that we're now funding very well actually improves. And, you know, my job and all ministers' job is to just get on and deliver that for people, and that's what we're all, I think, united in focusing on now.
Rishi Sunak, thanks very much for joining us this morning. That's the Chancellor there.